Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Saints Insider post-game show. I'm Zach Ewing, here from Southern Louisiana, not in New Jersey, obviously, but here to take you through the Saints' 14-11 victory over the New York Giants. The Saints survive in every sense of the word. They built a 14-3 lead in this game. They hang on. Only the fourth 14-11 final in NFL history, by the way. But probably bigger things to talk about, starting with the injury to starting quarterback Derek Carr. At the end of that game, Carr, I shouldn't say at the end of the game, but the fourth quarter, he diving for a first down. This was after the Giants had scored to make it 14-11. Carr dives for the first down on a running play, lands awkwardly on like his hand wrist area, and also hit the front of his face mask on the turf pretty hard. He left the game, taken to the locker room, officially being evaluated for a left hand injury and a concussion. So I guess the good news there is it's the left hand, it's not his throwing hand, but also the concussion, which Carr has a history of those. He had a couple of them last year. So obviously something that we'll have to keep an eye on. And I think Collins here, as we'll show your comments live, and Collins has a good one. Does this game make you believe it's time to blow this team up and try to start over? That is the big picture question. That's the question we have to answer. I'm kind of in the camp, Collins, that one game shouldn't make you decide anything in the NFL. Games happen, upsets happen. We almost saw the Carolina Panthers go into Philadelphia and win. And I know the Panthers are improved, but anything can happen in one game. So the Saints did not look good today. They did get the win. But I kind of think it was time to blow up and start over anyway. So I'm not, my mind was not changed by this one game, but certainly the Saints did not impress after honestly playing pretty well in the first three games of the Darren Rizzi era, wins over the Falcons and Browns. And even in a close loss to the LA Rams last week, I thought the Saints played fairly well. Today, they did not play well, but they do beat the New York Giants, who just frankly are pitiful. They're 2-11 now, and Drew Lock, their starting quarterback, misfired on his first 8 throws. Actually played better toward the end of the game, actually led the Giants down for, of course, the game-tying field goal drive at the end. But then Graham Gano's field goal was blocked by Bryan Bresee. And I think that's a good place to start here, too. Your player of the game quite clearly and obviously was the second-year defensive tackle Bryan Bresee, Saints' first-round draft pick out of Clemson a year ago, or a year and a half ago now, and had his best game as a professional. He had a sack, he had 2 pass breakups, and then, of course, he has the field goal block. I want to let you know before we really get going that the Saints Insider post-game show is brought to you by Tulane Doctors. Now at East Jefferson General Hospital, Tulane Doctors are bringing academic medicine to more patients in new communities. Look for the shield to know the future of medicine is here. Call 504-988-5000 to schedule with any Tulane doctor or visit tulanedoctors.com. Okay, so we're going to take your comments and questions as we go here. We're also going to have visits virtually from Times-Picayune columnist Rod Walker, and then hopefully Jeff Duncan. He's working on the live column, so we'll see when he gets done with that. And then also hoping to get call-ins from MetLife Stadium there in New Jersey from our beat writers, Luke Johnson and Matthew Paris, who are on site today. We'll also continue to show your comments and questions. Jacques, this is a sad team in dire need of a massive rebuild. Yeah, look, again, today, any win is a win in the NFL, okay, but this was not a pretty game. And I think it probably reminded some folks that this is just not a good football team. Credit for finding a way to win. They were not finding a way to win this game earlier in the year. In fact, it reminded me an awful lot of the loss that cost Dennis Allen his job in Carolina, where the Saints, it felt like they had control of the game throughout the third quarter and even into the fourth quarter. And then all of a sudden, the opposing team gets a touchdown. You're going, wait a minute, this game's not over. The Saints need to finish this thing. And they didn't finish it in Carolina. They didn't really finish it today. They had a couple of chances. Demario Davis did have a big interception. The Saints did force a fourth down when the Giants got the ball back again, but New York converted it. And then they go down, and finally the Saints do finish it with Bryan Bresee's block. So yeah, Jerry says Bresee MVP. Absolutely, he was. But like if the Saints lose this game, I think we're all going into the final 4 games going, okay, Darren Rizzi's not the guy. They need to find somebody else. And does a 3-point win where you block a field goal with 8 seconds left, does that really change your mind in that? As Paul says, Saints need to blow it up. Giants they weren't trying to lose. I mean, come on. No, I don't buy the NFL teams quit thing. I do think there's probably different levels of motivation, certainly. But the Giants were playing hard, especially on defense, I thought today. Their offense was just disjointed the whole way. Drew Lock was terrible for 3 quarters, kind of got it together, but ultimately not good enough. So that's our show. We're going to go through kind of the play-by-play. We'll get visits from guys. We'll take your comments and questions and all of that stuff as we go. First, we are going to take a break. We owe our sponsors a break here, so stay tuned, and we will be back right after this.
At Tulane Doctors, we know your health can't wait.
So we made booking appointments easier than ever.
Just dial 988-5000 to book with any physician, any specialty.
Whether at East Jefferson General Hospital or one of our other locations.
Because your health is our top priority.
And because navigating healthcare should be simple,
personal,
accessible.
When you see the shield, you'll know.
The future of medicine is here.
There's no better place to parlay than Caesars Sportsbook. Parlay Builder gives you all the game day action from all across the league. Multiple games, legs, and props, all in one spot. It's so quick and easy, you can keep your focus on the games and your nachos. Or if you're focusing on one game, remember, you can place your same game parlays live during the action. Caesars Sportsbook, the only sportsbook app with Caesars rewards.
All right, welcome back to the Saints Insider post-game show. Trying to make sure the video is right here. Oh, that's no good. That's no good. That's okay. You can see my name there. I am Zach Ewing. This is the Saints Insider post-game show. We're coming to you live after the Saints 14-11 victory over the New York Giants. Saints improve to 5-8. Keep your comments and questions rolling in. We got one from Collins during the break. A little disappointed in Kubiak's play calling. Was not a good day for the offense. I'll say this, the play calling is much more difficult when you can't run the ball. And the Saints from the beginning really couldn't run the ball. I mean, they showed it on the broadcast, like 8 negative plays, eight plays that lost yardage in the first half alone. I don't know how many they had in the second half, but a lot of those weren't sacks. Those were running plays. And when your running game is not only not helping you pick up first downs, but actually making you go backward, the play action game goes away. Any misdirection goes away. Defense can really start to tee off in the pass. And so the play calling, I don't think it was great, but I also think as an offensive coordinator, you're behind the 8 ball when you can't run the ball. And I think that was maybe the most disappointing thing today outside of Derek Carr's injury. But you can't run the ball against a bad run defense with your starting offensive line back. That was one of the talking points coming into this game. We talked about on the Saints Insider podcast this week was the Saints get Eric McCoy back. They get Lucas Patrick back. Cesar Ruiz did have a couple days. He missed practice this week, but he started. And then you had your tackles, Trevor Penning and Taliesa Fuanga, your starting tackles in. So you had your starting 5 on the offensive line all together for the first time since week 3. And it was only like the third play, maybe even the second play of that week 3 game against the Philadelphia Eagles when Eric McCoy had the groin injury that ultimately required surgery and cost him 8 weeks, and the Saints season falls apart. McCoy came back 1 week against the Browns, re-injured the groin, missed the Rams game, so he's back. Lucas Patrick is back at guard. I mean, and Lucas Patrick is not an all-pro player or anything, but he is your starting left guard. Eric McCoy is an all-pro type player at center, and so you get him back, and you just think, man, with that back against a Giants defensive front that's missing Dexter Lawrence, their stud defensive tackle, that's, just battered by injuries. They haven't been effective. We don't know what their motivation level's like. You should be able to run the ball down their throat all day long. And if you told me the Giants would only have 3 points going into the fourth quarter and would finish the game with 11, I would think the Saints kind of rolled up a pretty comfortable victory here. You score 21, 24 points and you're comfortable, but they couldn't do it. And in part, it's because they could not establish that running game. And John, same thing, awful play calling by coaches last 3 possessions. Well, again, can't run the ball when you're trying to run the clock out. And the last 2 possessions, you had Jake Haener in the game. So, Jake Haener, but it's funny, maybe the best thing he did was to hold on to the ball and take that sack on second down. I do question why you're throwing the ball at all on that play, but I wonder if they told, this is the second down and 9, second and 10, Saints are trying to run the clock out, and they told Haener, look, if the pass is wide open, you throw it, we could get the first down that ends this game. If it's not, you eat it, and I don't care if we lose 10 yards. And that's what happened. It wasn't open, and he ate it and forced the Giants to use a timeout. They ended up getting the ball back without any timeouts. And then that was pretty key actually down the stretch because they had to go spike the ball, remember, cost them a down. They only had 2 passes into the end zone, weren't able to run anything underneath because you couldn't get tackled in bounds. Everything had to be to the end zone. The Saints knew that. And so that actually was a key play. But yeah, the offense was not good all day. And it certainly was not good those last 3 possessions. But you got to run the ball. And then without your quarterback, we've seen this team's 0-3 without Derek Carr. We don't know his status for next week. Cindy says, any news on Carr? The only news during the game, it was announced as a right hand injury. And Darren Rizzi did clarify in the postgame, it is indeed Carr's left hand, which if you watch the replay, it was definitely his left hand kind of wrist area that he landed on. So that's the good news. I mean, I would think even if you had, I don't know, even if you broke a little bone or something in that left hand, could you play when that's not your throwing hand? Could you pump the ball? Would you be able to hang on to it if you get sacked and grab it with both hands? I don't know the answers to all those questions. And I don't even know if Carr and the Saints know the answers to those questions. And then, of course, the other half of this is that he's being evaluated for a concussion. He didn't look too bad to me. I really hate to speculate on concussion, so I won't. But I did see his face kind of hit the turf hard, but I didn't realize it was a concussion situation until later. So we'll see. I mean, sometimes they evaluate for concussions and it turns out, no, the guy's fine. And he could have gone back in the game if it hadn't been for the hand injury. But I don't know. I mean, we're going to have to see. It's too early. The Saints, I'm sure, don't even know yet. Colin says, wonder if a game like this shows Loomis we need all new coaches. Again, one game is not what you're going to evaluate everything on, but I do think it reminded people like, listen, this was not a good football team. Don't let the last 3 games fool you. Darren Rizzi doesn't have magic beans where everyone's going to suddenly play better. Still have huge issues on the offensive line, still have huge issues on defense, even though the defense played a mostly good game today. We'll see what the Saints want to do here. They do have 4 games left. And they are 5-8. They welcome the Washington Commanders to the Superdome next week. That's a game where at the beginning of the season, you probably looked at it as, oh, hey, there's a breather. The Saints get a bad team with a rookie quarterback. They might be able to pick up a big win late in the season. But now you look at Jaden Daniels, Commanders coming off a bye. The way they're playing, they're in playoff position, pretty likely to make the playoffs, even though they've slowed down a little bit. It's going to be a tough game. And obviously at this point, everything is a must win for the Saints. So let's talk about that. The Saints had per the Athletic and New York Times playoff model, Saints had a less than 1% chance to make the playoffs entering today. I don't assume that changed much. They did get a win, but that model probably assumed the Saints, had a good chance to win this game. So they do get a win. And the Atlanta Falcons did lose. The Falcons lost to the Minnesota Vikings. I believe the final there 42-21, and that is correct, the Vikings. But the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won. They beat the Raiders 28-13. So it's the Bucs, 3-time defending NFC South champions, who are back in first place at 7-6. Then you have the Falcons 6-7 and the Saints at 5-8. So it's not over. And if you're New Orleans, you'd rather have the Bucs in first place than the Falcons because you still play them and you could potentially still flip around that tiebreaker. Although I still think it's likely the Bucs would have the tiebreaker even if the Saints beat them. It would depend on how the Bucs do in their home game against the Panthers. It would also could come down to like common opponents. I'm not sure how that would all break down, but as of right now, the Bucs would hold that tiebreaker too. And so you're still you're 2 games behind, but losing the tiebreaker, you're effectively like 2.5 games behind with 4 to play. And now you do have the head-to-head game against the Bucks, but your problem too is the Falcons are still a game ahead. They do hold the tiebreaker. You don't have a head-to-head game left with Atlanta, and Atlanta's schedule the final 4 weeks is as easy as there is in the entire NFL. Now, they're not playing very well, and if Kirk Cousins keeps throwing the ball to the other team, he had how many picks did he have today? 2 more picks today. If he keeps throwing the ball to the other team, then all bets are off. But the Falcons' closing schedule is at Las Vegas. Okay, it is a road game, but the Raiders clearly not very good. Then home against these same Giants. You got to think the Falcons win that one. They do have a tough game at Washington in Week 17. And then they're home to face the Panthers, who are playing a little bit better. But again, home games against the Giants and the Panthers. If you could pick any 2 opponents, you pick. Give me home games against the Giants and the Panthers. And so the Falcons have 2 wins almost built into their schedule. So for the Saints to pass them, they would need the Falcons probably to lose both of the other 2 games at the Raiders and at the Commanders, and the Saints to win out, which of course means winning in Green Bay. It's beating the Commanders next week. It means winning in Tampa. So look, this is dire. And as far as the wild card is concerned, again, if the Saints were to win their last 4, including a head-to-head win over Washington, I mean, it's not mathematically impossible, but it is very unlikely. And I think like today, as a lot of you are saying, today shows you that this is just not a very good team. And I don't know that they are really going to be able to come close to winning these last 4 games. These next 2 are tough. You win the next 2, we can talk. You can beat Washington and win at Green Bay, then that's a different conversation. But at this point, especially with Derek Carr injured, that conversation is really kind of it's pretty far out there. You're talking about a miracle is what you need. Okay, we're going to bring on Jeff Duncan. He has finished with the post-game column. Jeff joining us from his New Orleans home. And Jeff, how do you write a column about that game? I'm curious.
I think you have a lot of fun with it, and that's what I've done is kind of put it in perspective. I mean, it was pretty much a rock fight between 2 really bad teams, and I think the best line I've got, Zach, is the fact they combined for 18 penalties, 15 punts, and I think it was 10 of 34 third down conversions. It puts into perspective how bad those 2 teams were. And the Saints held on, credit to them, but I don't think anybody that watched that game will come away thinking anything more of the Saints, maybe even less when you watch them claw and fight just to hold off a pretty hapless Giants team that was doing everything it could to beat itself in a game. So I had fun with the columns, probably what my readers would want.
Well, you can go read that at NOLA.com/Saints, but tune into our show for a little while longer. First, we'll be with you another half hour or so. I got to say, when it was 14-3 with like 10, 11 minutes left and the Saints were punting again, I mean, this was in the running for one of the worst NFL games I'd ever seen. It was just dreary. It was poor play by both offenses. I wouldn't even say the defenses were great. It was just bad by the offenses. You had missed field goals. You had penalties. You had the Saints scrapped together a couple of touchdowns and just beat a bad team. At least it got interesting at the end from an entertainment perspective. But that's probably a bad thing for the Saints. They come away with a Derek Carr injury. They come away with some questions as to how much of a mirage that little 3-game homestand was, where Darren Rizzi had him playing hard and everything. I kind of think this was a pretty stark reminder that this is not a good football team.
Yeah, I would say, look, obviously the injury to Derek Carr is a concern. We don't even know what that injury is. I don't know if they've announced it or not yet or not, but I think that in itself will put a nail in the season. And I've been saying for the last few weeks, we need to turn the page on this season anyway. I think most fans, frankly, have. I think they know the playoffs are just unrealistic at this point. I mean, technically the Saints are still alive mathematically, but realistically, it's a 1% chance. And, the Bucs now have a 2-game lead with 4 games to play. I think the magic number, if I did my math correct, is 2. So any combination of 2 Saints losses or 2 Bucs wins, and it's over. And when you have the Panthers left in Tampa, and the Saints playing, as you mentioned, anybody that watched that game today, Zach, and thinks that the Saints can go to Green Bay and win, or even beat the Commanders, I think is fooling themselves. So let's turn the page, I think, is what most people want to do, and start looking ahead. And I did a little of that in my column tonight, because I think that's what fans are really interested in, is what kind of changes we're going to see, who stays with the team, who goes, and what's the future look like more than anything else, because the present's pretty grim, as we saw today.
So again, you can read that column at NOLA.com/Saints and find out Jeff's thoughts about the Saints' future. But share a couple of them here. Darren Rizzi is now 3-1 as the interim coach. I think if he continues along that, let's say they don't win in Green Bay, but they pick off, I don't know, 2 of the other 3, and he finishes 5-3, I guess, as the head coach. I assume he'll get an interview, Jeff. But how serious of a candidate for this head coaching job do you think he is?
Well, I think he's going to – I don't think the wins and losses now, unless they run the table, then I think you got something that you need to look at. But I don't think the wins and losses are going to matter so much for Darren Rizzi. I mean, the front office, they know what they have in Darren Rizzi. I think they want to see the way the team responds to him, how he runs the team internally, and they're getting a good sample of that right now. So I think more than anything, that's what's important. Not, if they would have lost this game today or the way they won it, I think it's irrelevant in the big picture. In the grand scheme of things, he's playing kind of fighting with one hand tied behind his back with the injuries they have, and now with no Derek Carr. I think throw out the results and look more. I hate to coin a Mickey Loomis line, but the results right now are not that important for his candidacy, I think. But I think it'd be nice to know, Zach, what the organization is thinking. They haven't spoken publicly. We haven't heard from Mickey Loomis or Gail Benson. And I think they owe that to some degree to the fans to speak about what the future is and what the direction of the organization is. They like to wait till the end of the season. Well, it looks like we're going to have to wait to hear from them.
Yeah, I agree with you. I will say one, you can look beyond the results, and people got tired of that line, and Dennis Allen got fired, despite looking beyond the results. I will say one thing. It was a little refreshing. And before you came on the air, I made the comparison. This game felt an awful lot like that game in Carolina to me, where the Saints looked like they were kind of in control, even though they were sleepwalking against a bad team. And then all of a sudden, one touchdown by that bad team, and you go, wait a minute, the Saints could lose this game. And they found a way to win this one. And I don't know, some of that is just plain luck, making the right play at the right time. But there's something to be said. Dennis Allen had a history of losing close games and finding his team couldn't find that one more play. And today, Darren Rizzi did find the one more play on special teams. Brian Brzee, who had the best game of his career by a long shot. He had a sack, he had 2 pass breakups at the line, and then he had the field goal block to end it. So I'll say that, and I don't want to make this all doom and gloom. Like, let's give Brian Brzee some credit here. He had a great game, and it's good for the Saints to see young players producing.
Yeah, I think that's what people want to see. Kendre Miller showed some flashes today. Kool-Aid McKinstry, I thought, played well at corner. I think that's what is of interest right now to fans, seeing some of the progression of the younger talent on the roster, because that's the future right now. And so you're right. Some of those players stepping forward certainly is cause for optimism right now. But when you look at the wins the Saints have had, I just try to put things into proper perspective. I mean, they're beating the worst teams in the league. And I think right now you can throw the Atlanta Falcons down there with the worst teams in the league. I know their record's better than that, but they've lost 4 in a row and they're non-competitive. And right now the Saints, I think 4 of their 5 wins have come against the worst teams in football. It's hard to say anything else. Maybe all their wins if you throw the Falcons in there. So I'm just trying to be realistic here. If this team played the Buffalo Bills or the Eagles or somebody like that right now, I think it would be pretty ugly.
Yeah, I agree. And we may find out the next 2 weeks. They play Washington and Green Bay, who are teams in playoff spots and certainly in playoff contention. We'll see. Now, they did, I thought, played hard against the Rams last week, had a chance to win that game. Rams, I believe, are up on Buffalo right now. So, they can play with good teams, but ultimately this game's a reminder where it's just like, hey, it's a pretty long shot, and this was ugly, and obviously without Derek Carr, it may get even uglier. The Saints are now 5-5 with Carr as the starter. They're 0-3 in their other 3 games, and whether it's Jake Haener or Spencer Rattler, you're certainly not beating the Commanders or Packers without Derek Carr. He was 20 of 31 for 219 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. That was the Giants' first interception since week 1, as you pointed out before the game. They hadn't had one since week 1. It was a little bit of an arm punt. It was kind of a deep ball, not a great throw, but also not a real damaging interception. You mentioned Kendre Miller. He had 10 carries for 32 yards. And the touchdown early, which was an impressive run. Alvin Kamara was bottled up, 17 carries, 44 yards. And I mentioned this, we had a commenter say earlier, the play calling sucked. It was, the offense looked stagnant. Well, when you can't run the ball, that's what this offense does. It stagnates. And I was more disappointed with that than anything, is that with your starting offensive line back in the game, there was no push. There was no run game. They struggled for anything they got. And, I think finished like less than 3 yards a carry.
Yeah, they were getting bullied up front by a lot of backups for the Giants. I mean, Kayvon Thibodeau played and Brian Burns played, but their other starters were out. And there were guys playing that were undrafted free agents. And I thought Cesar Ruiz I don't know if he's still showing lingering effects from his concussion and injury, but he did not play well today at right guard. And, it showed in the run game. They just couldn't get anything going. They had more negative runs today, Zach, than I've seen them in a game all year. Maybe the most I've ever seen against the worst run defense in the entire league. That's the other thing. Let's put it in perspective here. It wasn't the 85 Bears they were going against. So, I think they've got to go back to the drawing board, because that was not the performance that they're going to have anything to be proud of.
Yeah, only 92 rushing yards, 2.8 yards per attempt. That's pretty dreary. And as you mentioned, like a lot of negative plays, just couldn't get a push. And that's the sort of thing where the rest of your offense is going to look bad.
I thought the pass blocking was good. I mean, they gave Carr time, and when he had time, he was able to find some guys downfield. I thought for the most part, he played pretty well. He's doing what they are asking him to do, and that is don't make the big killer mistake. The one interception was basically like a punt. He's getting rid of the ball quickly. He's not taking sacks, because this team's margin for error, Zach, is just so minuscule. They can't overcome any of that. And, they're playing with their backup wide receivers. I thought he utilized the tight ends again today, which is something he's going to have to do. And you can see what the plan is now without Taysom. They're going to filter in a little Kendre Miller in the backfield. Dallin Holker caught a 10-yard pass today. I think he's going to take some of the reps at tight end. And they're just going to have to piecemeal this thing together without Taysom in there. They don't have a player. No one in the league has a player that can do the stuff Taysom Hill can do. So, he's a little hamstrung right now as a play caller. There's not a lot of plays you dial up for Cedric Wilson, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I also thought that when it was 14-3, they got kind of conservative and saw that the Giants weren't mounting much of a threat and said, let's just get out of here. And then all of a sudden the Giants do get the touchdown, and then Carr gets hurt like 2 plays after that. And all of a sudden everything kind of changes, where you're going, okay, well, we'd like to be more aggressive now, but we can't be because the quarterback's out, and it's late in the game. And so it was a weird game from that perspective, but you're right. Like, look at these leading receivers. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, 4 catches, 51 yards. Juwan Johnson, 4 catches, 50 yards in the TD. Foster Moreau, 2 catches, 40 yards. Alvin Kamara, 5 for 35. Cedric Wilson, 1 for 18. Jamal Williams, 2 for 10. Dallin Holker, 1 for 10. And then Kevin Austin, 1 for 5. So, go back to September and tell a Saints fan that those are going to be your receiving stats for a game. And I don't think anybody thinks they're going to win any games. So keep it in perspective. I don't know. Is a win in the NFL, Jeff? Do we just count this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's just hard for me when I've watched what the standard is for Saints football, past years. And I think most fans have. So what the standard should be. That's what we keep hearing from people on Airline Drive, Zach. Keep hearing about the expectations should be high, and we know what the standard is. So rightfully so, it's better than what we're seeing. It's not, even with these injuries, I mean, here you are at the end of the game, get Malik Neighbors on the ground. I mean, 2 guys miss him, what should have been about a 6-yard gain turned into about a 20-something yard gain because of poor angles, poor fundamental tackling. That's the same stuff we've seen all year long in the clutch, make the play. I mean, if anything, the Giants' mistakes, self-inflicted mistakes, a penalty on a punt return that was really ticky-tack, but really didn't have anything to do with the play, cost them a touchdown. They get a 15-yard penalty on a ridiculous play. They negated a field goal. They had numerous false starts. I mean, they had so many pre-snap penalties. I mean, and then Drew Lock inexplicably has a chance to run for a first down in Saints territory on 3rd down, and he just veers right. I have no idea what he was doing, and runs right into the defense, and they have to punt. I mean, these aren't plays the Saints are making. These are terrible plays by the Giants, and you see exactly why they've won 2 games all year, and yet you still barely beat that team. I mean, it says a lot.
12 penalties for 112 yards for the Giants. So let's bring on Rod Walker, and he'll join the show. He's our other Times-Picayune columnist, also pulling double duty with the Pelicans game tonight. So we'll be brief with Rod. But Rod, would the Saints and Pelicans played baseball or something, who would win? Like, these are 2 really bad franchises right now.
I don't know. I think it'll be a game that'll go to a lot of extra innings.
A lot of errors.
A lot of
Bill Buckner moments.
A lot of errors, a lot of injuries, and a lot of that stuff. Yeah.
How do you sum this Saints game up? Saints looked like they were in control. I've compared it to the Carolina game, where then all of a sudden they weren't in control, and you thought, oh man, this might actually happen. They could lose this game. Some credit, obviously, for finishing the job. Ryan Brissy blocks the field goal, but I think it was a reminder that this franchise is not in a good place.
Yeah, that was one of the things I mentioned in my 3 things we learned. I just felt like, yeah, they're mathematically in it, but I mean, if they weren't playing such a dysfunctional team, they're not leaving MetLife Stadium with a victory. I mean, it was just a lot of bad football, and they finished, which is something Rizzi kind of emphasizes how they need to finish games, and they did make a play to finish it, and you had Mario with the interception, before the blocked field goal. But there was nothing about this game that makes me think that this team can put enough games, enough wins together over these last 4 games to catch the Bucs or the Falcons.
And that's especially true if Derek Carr is going to miss time. I mean, it's a left hand injury and it's a concussion. It's both things that could be really nothing. Maybe it's not. He was evaluated for concussion. Maybe he doesn't actually have one. And the left hand is not non-throwing hand. If it's just bruised or sprained or something, maybe he could play with that injury. So maybe it's nothing, but also maybe he's out for a few weeks. We don't know yet. But the idea that this team could beat Washington and then go to Green Bay and win that game is frankly pretty laughable at this point.
Yeah, just watching Carr as he walked off the field. I mean, he wasn't moving that left arm much at all. Like, it was just kind of like hanging there, and that's just me watching him, watching from TV. So maybe it's not as bad as it looked, but I thought it, just watching him walk off the field, I thought it looked pretty bad, and even seeing him laying on the field, it looked pretty bad too. So we'll see if he can come back and play. But if not, I mean, we saw what this team was without Derek Carr early in the season, and that wasn't pretty either. So I mean, I think this team is already really limited on offense. Other than, you got Carr, and I don't know what this team would even do without Alvin Kamara, because he kind of does everything for him. But Kendre showed some good flashes today. I think they only averaged 2.8 yards per carry. I mean, they really struggle running the ball, which is, that's their bread and butter. So just to me, it wasn't a lot good to take away from this game. I mean, they did get a win, but that team was really bad as they played.
It'll be interesting to see if Carr can't go, what they do this time. If they go back to Rattler, I think that's the one thing I'm kind of intrigued about, if they have to make a decision there. Do they go to Haener or Rattler? I think it's up in the air right now at this point. Plus, Dennis Allen's the one that made that call before, and he's not around anymore. So we'll see how it plays out.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about it's a different coach making that decision this time. So yeah, that will be intriguing to see. And hopefully Rizzi will, if Carr can't go, hopefully we find out early in the week and aren't being strung along all week. That's me selfishly wanting that.
And he would be he's been different from DA in that perspective too, is that if he knows something, he'll go ahead and tell you, although that's more with injuries, I'm thinking, than Is this a situation where maybe he could kind of play peekaboo with the Commanders and you don't know who he's going to bring out on Sunday? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. And there may be question marks throughout the whole week with Derek also. Watching the Saints Insider postgame show, it's brought to you by Tulane Doctors. The Saints survived the Giants 14-11. I know there's going to be a segment of fans out there too who why did we win this game? We lose, the draft pick goes up, and if Carr's out, there's a chance they could finish 4-13 and be picking in the top 5 and all of that. I still say you win every game you can in the NFL. They're not easy to come by. But I will say, Rod, and this is a good opportunity to talk about Bryan Bresee, is that the draft pick is going to matter as you start to rebuild this team. And if you're not going to be picking top 5 most likely, but you might be picking top 10. And I think, it's good to see young players like Bresee have big games, make plays. We talked about Kendry Miller too. From the point of view that the Saints need to give the fans something to hope for, right?
Yeah, and that was my third talking point today in my 3 and out. I talked about Kendry and Bryan Bresee, the two guys from that 2023 draft class, and those are really the only ones that they've kind of hit on in that class. I mean, I guess you could include Saldivari, but
Jordan Howden, yeah.
I mean, he's been okay, but I mean, those two guys are guys you feel like you might can actually, build something around if, and that's assuming Kendry can stay healthy. Because I mean, you saw he runs really hard. I mean, he was pretty impressive on the carries that he did get today. The touchdown was really impressive. So I thought that was promising. I mean, I think you want to see that, and I mean that block punt was phenomenal. I mean, the athleticism that it took for a big guy to make that play was, saved the day. And he barely got his hand on the ball, but it was enough to secure the win. But I think those were, really big plays by 2 second-year players.
On that note, Rod, we'll let you go after this, but what are you looking for the last 4 games? I mean, assuming the Saints don't go on some miracle run and beat playoff-bound teams in 3 of their last 4 games, what would you like to see from the Saints and from Darren Rizzi?
I mean, you want to see them keep playing hard. I mean, they're not going to quit. We know Rizzi wanted to win this game today. He was back at home, so he wanted to win that one. But I want to see a lot of these younger guys. I want to see more of Kendry Miller. Maybe take some of the load off of Alvin even more if you can, and that would be the main thing for me. I mean, you want to see the offense get going. I mean, the running game was pretty stagnant today. The receivers aren't really giving you much of anything. If you didn't have those tight ends, I don't know. The tight ends are kind of carrying all the load as far as receiving. So maybe some of those younger receivers can kind of step up and play. And Bub Means comes back next week. That could be a help too. And I guess we want to see what they do against Jaden Daniels. I mean, we know the Saints struggles against those kind of quarterbacks. So you definitely want to see what they do in that game.
Well, the speedster Drew Lock ran for 59 yards on 5 carries against him. And as Jeff mentioned, could have had more if he had just decided to run on that 1 third down play instead of pulling up. But Jaden Daniels might be a bit of a challenge. So speaking of challenges, Rod's pulling double duty. He's got Pelicans duty, so he's going to go talk to Willie Green here. Rod, thanks for hopping in, man.
All right, thanks, man.
All right, so he's Rod Walker.
I was going to say, Jaden Daniels might run for 150 yards on this team.
You want to start him in DFS and all that stuff next week.
Yeah, I mean, just to see how many times it happened today with Locke, the undisciplined rush lanes that this front 4 has. I mean, there's a reason these quarterbacks are able to do what they're doing, and it's just kind of unsound fundamentals up front that leave those lanes open, and it almost cost them again today.
Yeah, no doubt. We're going to take another break here on the Saints Insider post-game show, awaiting hopefully calls in from Luke Johnson and Matthew Paris from MetLife Stadium after they talk to the Saints up there. We will get their viewpoints and continue with Jeff Duncan right after this.
At Tulane Doctors, we know
Your health can't wait.
So we made booking appointments easier than ever.
Just dial 988-5000 to book with any physician, any specialty.
whether at East Jefferson General Hospital or one of our other locations.
Because your health is our top priority.
And because navigating healthcare should be simple,
Personal.
Accessible.
When you see the shield, you'll know.
The future of medicine is here.
There's no better place to parlay than Caesars Sportsbook. Parlay Builder gives you all the game day action from all across the league. Multiple games, legs, and props, all in one spot. It's so quick and easy, you can keep your focus on the games and your nachos. Or if you're focusing on one game, remember, you can place your same game parlays live during the action. Caesars Sportsbook, the only sportsbook app with Caesars rewards.
Welcome back to the Saints Insider Postgame Show, coming to you live after the Saints beat the New York Giants 14-11. Ugly game. The right result, I guess, at least most of you would agree with that. I still say root for your team to win. You win every game you can. You only get 17 of them. And it is an ugly one. So, Jeff, we're going to let you get out of here soon so you can finish up your column. But give us your final thoughts on this one and just where the Saints go here with like a quarter of the season to go and not a lot to hope for.
Well, I think just let's look at some of these young players. I think there is some reason to be optimistic after seeing Rizzi play the way he did today. I think I agree with Rod. I'd like to see more of Kendre Miller. I mean, what do we have to learn from Alvin Kamara at this point, right? Let's see Kendre Miller, see what you have in him. And then also I think get Bub Means back, get him out there. I wouldn't mind seeing them activate Mason Tipton. Look, you want to continue to win games, but at the same time, I think you want to evaluate the young players on the roster, going forward to see kind of what you're working with as it goes. Look, you got a big home game coming up against the Commanders, one of the teams that's fighting for a playoff spot. It's going to be an electric environment with Jaden Daniels there. It's going to be a huge test, I think, for this defense. The way they're playing offensively, Cliff Kingsbury and his offensive scheme is very unique. It'll give them a lot of problems, I think, in man-to-man coverage. So there will be a lot to watch in that game going forward. And you can actually, I think, see how this team measures up in the next couple of weeks when they play the Packers and play the Commanders. We'll see how they measure up with the good teams in the league. And I think that's important for Darren Rizzi and the staff. We know that they can beat the bad teams like the Browns and the Giants, but let's see where they're at when they play, two of the better teams probably in the NFC right now.
All right. He's Jeff Duncan. You can read his column on NOLA.com/Saints when he finishes that up. So we'll let him get going. Thanks, Jeff. And I think Matt Paris is trying to join us from New York. Let's see if we can get him. Matt, down on the MetLife Stadium turf. You think you could kick a field goal down there? How are the winds?
No, I definitely could not. But wind is not bad. It's actually very nice out. So,
that's good to hear. The Saints get a win today, which we haven't been able to say too often this year. So that's one thing. But obviously, Matt, an ugly game and kind of one of these reminders that the Saints they're just not a very good football team.
No, I mean, the Giants fans. There was a plane before the game that called the Giants a dumpster fire, and the Saints might not be a dumpster fire, but they may be slightly less than that. A garbage can. I don't know.
Yeah, something like that. Matt, you may be holding your.
Here we go.
Here we
Sorry,
go. Yeah, you can hear you a lot better now. That's good.
There we go.
But yeah, you were saying like they're not a dumpster fire, but they're not.
But then it doesn't
far
smell right.
above
Doesn't smell quite right either. So
yeah.
It is. This was an ugly win. I thought that it was going to be a comfortable win, and then you're riding on 4 minutes left on deadline, and that's the way it goes sometimes. But it's a concerning game just because also Derek Carr is now hurt again, and we don't know yet what's going to go on there. He has a left hand injury that's not his throwing hand like initially believed, so that's good from that standpoint. But we also don't know if he has an actual concussion either. And then the Saints have to decide now whether they go back to Jake Haener or to Spencer Rattler like they did before when Carr missed time. So a disappointing game, I think, kind of all the way around, even though they won.
Yeah, no doubt. And with Carr, I was talking to Jeff and Rod and saying, like, look, this could be nothing. I mean, it could be he's practicing on Wednesday because he was checked for a concussion. We don't know that he actually had a concussion. It's his non-throwing hand. Depending on what the injury is, that may not be a big deal at all. It may just be he was in pain and the game was almost over and he also needed to be checked for the concussion, so they had to take him out. I mean, we don't know any of that. It could also mean he's done for the rest of the season. I mean, literally could be either of those endpoints. I will say at some point you have to ask, how likely is it we're making a run anyway? And if Derek Carr is in our plans for next year, do we push him back out there? We've talked about this. The Saints have to win basically the rest of their games and get some unlikely help to even have a chance at this thing. So it's one of those tricky situations.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think it makes sense to shut him down if he has a chance to play. They're still in this division. I know Tampa won today, but the Falcons are falling apart. It's still very slim, less than 1% are still the odds, but they have a favorable schedule for the most part, except I guess the Commanders and the Packers and I guess Tampa Bay. So,
It's not that favorable.
No, it's not that favorable. I was realizing that there's only 5 games left. So I guess I could say that they could be in those games. None of those games scream blowout to me. And if things go your right way, but that there's going to be things they have to fix. Like the run game today wasn't very good. That was, I think, maybe the biggest surprise on the field. You thought that they were going to just run over the Giants, and the Giants did a really nice job of shutting them down. And we'll have to see. But I don't think they don't. I know they don't view it like that. Like that the season's over. Let's fold it all and go home. I think they have something at least to play for, at the very least, and they're gonna try as long as hope's alive, I guess.
As long as there's a mathematical chance, sure, and you should. Brian Brzee, I don't think anyone would have labeled him as a bust as a first-round pick from 2 years ago. He was fine. He has some problems to overcome, and he's had some good moments. But I think today was really the first time he showed, hey, I can be a game changer. I can make that first-round pick look really good. He won this game for the Saints.
He did, and he's leading all defensive tackles and sacks right now, I believe. So Luke tweeted that out earlier. Just has this really nice athleticism that is hard to find with his size. That's what appealed. That's what drew the Saints to him in the first place. He's very flexible, has great anticipation on those field goal blocks and those pass breakups. I was asking Colin Saunders after the game kind of what goes into that, and he really hammered home that anticipation. So I do think he's playing better. I mean, we were just talking a few weeks ago about kind of how his season had kind of been a disappointment, just a little bit under the radar. He lost his starting job back to Saunders after the beginning of the year. But I think he's turned a little bit of a corner recently, and he's always been a very consistent pass rusher. So, I mean, that's promising to see at the least.
Demario Davis gets an interception. The defense, it's a little bit hard to tell, especially in the first half, if that was good defense or just bad Drew Lock and bad Giants offense. But you give them some credit for allowing the Saints to take control of this game anyway. But there were some major areas of concern. We saw the Darren Rizzi screaming at Matthew Hayball on the sideline for, I think Daryl Johnston on the broadcast seemed to think it was more about the way Hayball pursued the punt. Did Rizzi mention that after the game?
He did not. He said that like one of the final punts is kind of how they wanted to play it, that he did a better job of adjusting after that. So I guess depending on Hayball's pursuit afterward, but he was very upset. Alvin Kamara had to kind of come in between them and kind of simmer tensions. And yeah, I mean, that was, Rizzi said it was ironic that they won on a blocked field goal because it was probably the worst special teams performance in quite a bit. So.
Yeah, no, it was. And I mean, the Giants had 12 penalties for 112 yards, including one on that play, one on another field goal that Graham Gano did make that obviously would have made a difference later in the game. So there's certainly a sense that they got away with this one against a really bad team. Where does that leave them going forward? Whether Carr plays or not,
I mean, it's just hard to I know I talked about the division being play, but it's hard to believe. I don't think any of us believe that they could make an actual run, but definitely now. I mean, the Giants are terrible. There's really no, I'm trying to be kind, but I don't necessarily have to be. They're just bad. I mean, there's only a handful of other stadiums or cities that I think would fly a plane above a stadium to say how bad your team is, and this is definitely one of them. And they've won 2 games. Their coaching staff and front office staff is apparently safe, but God, I don't know how you can watch that and just see like why they would keep things the same, but I guess that's for them.
What did the plane say? I missed this
It
plane.
said, Mr. Mara, enough. Please get rid of this dumpster fire or something. Please change this dumpster fire. Something like that.
That's fantastic. We also saw some bag heads, which
Yeah.
the OG Saints fans will recognize. So it was just ugly all the way around. But the Saints do get the win, 14-11. Anything else stick out to you, Matt, before we let you go? You know, you mentioned the running game struggling, and this was with the starting offensive line back, something we thought would be a boost to this offense. It did not work out.
Yeah, no, it didn't. The offensive line, you said? Sorry, I cut out there.
Yeah. Is it offensive line or anything else you want to wrap up with?
No, yeah, I mean, the offensive line, that was surprising. Just, I thought they held up okay in pass protection, but you just didn't really see that lift in the run game. And I asked Foster Moreau after the game what kind of happened there, and said that the Giants did a really nice job of handling stunts and doing those, just sort of scheming things open that, obviously they didn't have Dexter Lawrence. And the Saints didn't necessarily, he said when, there are stunts like that, there's normally an opportunity for a big play, and they just didn't hit it. So,
yeah, no real big plays to speak of. Maybe a couple of 20-yard pass plays, but that was it for today. And the Saints survive it, 14-11. They come home. It is officially Matthew Paris, Washington Commanders, New Orleans Saints week. So we're ready. Those of you who don't know, Matt used to cover the Commanders for the Washington Times and now covers the Saints, obviously. So I guess I need to get a comment from you. Your thoughts on that?
It's a big. Oh, I had a nice early taste of it today because Greg Stroman, who wiped out the return touchdown for the Giants, used to play in Washington, and so I was surprised to see he was still in the league. But good for him. He's a really good dude, and he's made a career of it. But he's been in the league now for a minute. But yeah, Greg Stroman.
Greg Stroman kicks off. Yeah, he kicks off Washington, New Orleans, Matt Paris week. Exactly. We'll have much more on the Saints Insider podcast this week with Matt, but we're going to let him get to work, get back upstairs, and get writing. Thank you, Matt.
Yep. Thanks. Yep.
All right, that's Matthew Paris. Still waiting on Luke Johnson, hopefully joining us here in the last few minutes of the show. Thank you all for hanging out with us on the Saints Insider post-game show. The Saints win it 14-11. We'll run down the stats real quick. The Saints had only 292 yards of offense. Giants had 325, so the Saints actually end up getting outgained. I think that was pretty lopsided in the fourth quarter. The Giants actually end up 213 to 200 in passing yards and 112 to 92 in rushing yards. Giants were 5 of 19 on third down. They were 2 of 4 on fourth down. They had 12 penalties for 112 yards. Saints were 5 of 15 on third down, 0 of 1 on fourth down. That was the fake punt. Interesting call at that point in the game, and Jamal Williams comes up just like half a yard short. That would have been something that could have helped the Saints put the game away earlier. Saints did have just 6 penalties for 40 yards, so that was a bright spot. All right, and we do have Luke Johnson from the MetLife Stadium press box. Luke, I'm just going to guess Matt had to write the gamer, and you may be thankful for that.
Yeah, man. I actually turned to him. I think he was even after Brian Rizzi, and he was just like trying to be like focused and not on anything I say. And I was just like, man, glad I didn't have the game story today. Those are not fun to turn around.
Just what he wanted to hear, I'm sure.
Exactly. And I was like, okay, well, I haven't written anything yet. I'm going to go down to the interviews. Have fun with that. Yeah, man, it was. Those are not fun games to cover from our perspective until like well after they're done. You can write a good story about it, but it was a crazy finish to that game. I certainly thought they were going to go to overtime, but like there was just like a little inkling in the back of my head that something crazy was going to happen on that kick. As Kendre Miller said after the game, there's like some Rizzi magic, some voodoo going on with those field goals. Teams seem to be missing a lot of them against the Saints these days.
Yeah, and they did make one, but the other one the Giants made was wiped off because of a penalty too. So no doubt you are writing, I believe, on Brian Rizzi. So let's start there. As I was telling Matt, no one would have called him a bust. He's been a productive first round pick, but this was the first time he was really like a game wrecker, and people had to take notice of the guy, I think, league wide.
I think so. And look, he's still got a lot of development to do as a player. Like, we talked about it on the podcast, I think earlier this week, where he's just, he's got to improve as a run defender to be like a true 3-down player. But the fact of the matter is he's leading all NFL interior players in sacks right now, 7.5 on the season. It's most on the Saints, and it's most by any defensive tackle in the NFL. He had multiple quarterback pressures. There was a big one on a 3rd down late in the game where he forced Locke into a rush throw that ended up falling incomplete. And on the next play, 4th down, Locke throws an interception to Mario Davis on just like kind of crazy got to have it play. So he impacted the game there. He batted the ball down at the line of scrimmage twice. Made a tackle for loss in the run game today. He obviously had the game clinching block kick at the end of the game. Like he's like a really skilled, talented player. And if they can get the most out of him, he can be a really good player. He may never be like the complete package as a player. That's okay though. Like the stuff that he does really well, he does really, really well.
No doubt. And the defense pretty good all day long. I mean, allow the 2 fourth quarter drives. Giants kind of had some 4th down magic on a couple of those and extend them. And Drew Lock started to play better, but he was so bad early in the game. It's hard to say if that was good Saints defense, just plain old bad offense.
A little bit of both, I think. A little bit of both. I think that early in the game, like the Saints had a good pass rush plan. This is not a Saints pass rush that has really been super effective this year, but the Giants were down a number of starting offensive linemen. The Saints really capitalized on that early. Drew Lock didn't complete a pass until 2 minutes were gone into the second quarter. A little bit of that was the Saints pass rush kind of heating him up, and a little bit of that was Lock just making some kind of poor decisions, poor throws. But look, the Saints are now 3-1 under Darren Rizzi. This is the second time he's under his leadership the defense has closed out games. That was a huge problem under Dennis Allen. Say what you want about it being kind of needing a break, getting Brian Brzee to block a kick there, about it being the Giants, about it being Drew Lock. They still got it done. They found ways to lose these games in the past. So kudos to them for finishing on that side of the ball. They still got to get better on offense, though.
Well, flipping over to that side, the number one story is Derek Carr's injury. Injuries can be hard to speculate on the day of game anyway. We don't know how bad something is. This one seems especially difficult to me. I mean, it's this non-throwing hand. Could really be nothing. Could be something that you can't play football with. I don't care what hand it is. The concussion, we don't even know if it was a concussion. We just know he was evaluated for it. So this one really feels like it could be really not anything major at all, or it could be the rest of the season. I mean, or anything in between. Yeah, I mean, obviously his throwing hand is his more important hand, right? But a simple fact of the matter is you have to have your left hand to play quarterback. Yeah, you've got to be able to hand the ball off with your left hand sometimes. You have to be able to take a snap. They can't just be back and shotgun the whole game. If he's got some significant damage to his hand, and it appears that might be the case, like he might miss time. He might miss the rest of the season. You just don't know. So it's going to be something we watch very closely, because I think even though Derek Carr is an imperfect quarterback and he just had an okay game today, he's clearly their best option. And, this is a team that is clearly still trying to win games. They're not trying to just like tank and improve their draft stock. Like Darren Rizzi is trying to go for this job. He's trying to win games. And the best way to do that is with a pretty good NFL quarterback under center. And, there's just definitely no guarantees that that's going to be the case. Right. And without Carr, team's 0-3, and I don't think anyone would pick them to win either of the next 2 games without that quarterback. What about the running game, Luke? The Giants came in, we talked about this on Friday's podcast, terrible running defense. The Saints just could not get anything going on the ground. It was bizarre. I still, I'm looking forward to going back and kind of getting a closer look at this game, because the Saints had their opening day starting offensive line out there for the first time since the opening series of week 3. And when we've seen them have Eric McCoy and Cesar Ruiz and Fuaga and Penning and all them in the lineup together, they've been a really good rushing offense. It was not the case today. The Giants came in today number 29 in the NFL in run defense. I think they were giving up 145 yards per game. I think they were dead last in yards per carry allowed.
It's a bad run defense, and they were playing without their best defensive interior player in Dexter Lawrence, who's really a superb player. He's one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. And they shut the Saints run game down today. I mean, I think 8 or 9 negative plays from the running game. It was ugly. And, especially if Derek Carr is missing time, like they need that to be good to help those young quarterbacks out. So like they got to figure something out, because this was the game that they should have been able to run the ball for 130, 140, 150 yards, take pressure off the quarterback, control the game. And they didn't even come close to that today. And if they're going to have any chance at beating either of the next 2 teams in their schedule, like this is going to have to get better.
Okay, we'll wrap up with that. The next 2 games are very difficult. Home against the Commanders and your Rookie of the Year favorite, and Jaden Daniels, of course, the Heisman winner at LSU, and then at the Green Bay Packers the week after that. The Saints are in a situation where they've got to win their last 4 games. There's really no other choice in the matter. They've got to do it. So if they're going to make the playoffs is what I mean. So you mentioned Rizzi Magic, Luke. He's 3-1. He's done a good job so far. I mean, he's really going to have to ratchet that up here as we go forward. And I think a lot of fans are ready to just turn the page and say, hey, let's look at next season. You mentioned the Saints are still playing hard. They're still trying to win. So that's kind of the balance that we've got to strike here in this last quarter of the season.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things that we asked Rizzi about after the game was the way he's challenging the players with the narratives. It's been a long time since the Saints, outside of that Rizzi's first game, they have a loss and they don't let it turn into another loss. They've been really bad on the road. They've been bad in the cold. He challenged all those guys with these narratives this week. And there's another big narrative out there, and that's the Saints have really struggled against the NFL's premier teams. They beat teams like the Giants. They beat teams like the Browns. They beat teams like the Falcons, who are really struggling right now. They lose to the Rams. Rams are a good team. Now they got 2 more coming up on their schedule. Washington and Green Bay. Can they hang with those guys? Can they beat those guys? They haven't been able to do that for several years now. So I imagine that's going to be a talking point with the team this week. Whether that matters, I mean, who knows? When Drew Lock is rushing for 59 yards against you today, it's not a good sign going up against Jaden Daniels next week. I mean, I shudder to think about how many rushing yards he's going to pile up against this defense. But look, they got a chance to change the narrative about him. We'll see if they actually follow through on it.
All right, so that's next week, and we'll have a couple of Saints Insider podcasts before that. We'll let Luke get to writing. He's Times-Picayune beat writer Luke Johnson. Thanks, Luke.
My pleasure.
All right, and that will do it for our Saints Insider postgame show. We appreciate everybody hanging out with us. A lot of people here for the whole show. Certainly appreciate that. Look, I know the Saints are not a good team, and today's game was pretty boring for 3 quarters, but I would not say this is a boring franchise right now. Lots of different storylines to follow over the last 4 weeks. We've got the Derek Carr injury. We've got young players. We've got Darren Rizzi trying to show that he's the man for the job against this sort of tide of opinion that the Saints just need to blow everything up and start over and have no ties to the previous regime. And Darren Rizzi obviously would be that tie. So it's interesting to see where it goes. And in the background, you have that Lloyd Christmas. So you're telling me there's a chance in the NFC South where nobody's running away with it. And if the Saints were to pull an upset next week, they could go into Green Bay on Monday Night Football in Week 16, still probably with a chance to win to win the division and make the playoffs. Is it likely? Absolutely not. But we'll continue to follow the story regardless. So our thanks to our sponsor, Tulane Doctors, for their sponsorship of the post-game coverage. Thanks to Jeff Duncan, Rod Walker, Matthew Paris, and Luke Johnson for stopping by. And most of all, thanks to you all for hanging out with us on the Saints Insider postgame show. We will be back with a Saints Insider podcast on Wednesday. So check it out. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the like button while you're down there. Hit the bell for notifications, and you will get notified when we go live on Wednesday. So until then, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.